Hi guys, so in episode 5 what we're going to do is we're going to simulate some damage on the front end of this wing here, and then we're going to go through the stage of recolouring that area and blending the base coat through the panel so we've got a nice seamless repair. Okay, so before we start this video on this panel, a lot of you guys have been asking about if I do hands-on training in my own shop. It's something that we have actually started to do now. We are running the first few training days in March. If anyone's interested, I'll leave a link in the description to our Facebook page. If you get in touch through there, and then we can have a chat from there. Okay, so we've got a panel here and we've just simulated a little bit of a key mark in the front of this panel. What we're going to use is just some P500 on a disc, and I've just got a little bit of a felt block, and all we're going to do to start off with is we're just going to block out this key mark from the front of this panel. Now it's best to try and keep nice diagonal strokes running nice and even, and we just want to feather this out so we remove this damage and get this damage right out of this panel before we start. And because I thought you guys wouldn't want to see me sanding this for the next sort of few minutes, I've just sped this little bit of footage up, but you can get the gist of what we've done here from this little bit of footage. Okay, so as it stands now, we've got that nice little key mark out of it. There's no remnants of the scratches anywhere in the panel. So what we're going to do now is go on to panel prep. Now there's two ways that you can prep a blend panel. You could use grey Scotch-Brite. Well, my preferred method is I like to use a P1000 disc on the DA with an interface pad, sand the whole panel down, get it nice and flat so it's a nice matte finish, and then I'll just use a little bit of grey Scotch-Brite to go around the edges, and then just to make sure that everything's keyed up. So we've now got our air-powered DA with the P1000 disc on and the interface pad. Now the interface pad is that soft foam pad that's in between the disc and the actual main velcro backing on the sander itself. Now the whole purpose of this interface pad is to give even pressure across the paintwork surface. So if you don't have that pad on and you've just got the hard back DA side with the pad on it, obviously that can give uneven pressure over a curved panel like this, whereas the interface pad just spreads that pressure out that little bit nicer. So as long as you're keeping your sander nice and flat, then you're going to get a nice, smooth, even and uniform sanded finish across it, and you're not going to risk putting in any low spots by digging the sander in on its end or anything like that. Now this is a process that does take a little bit of time to learn as far as sanding clear coat like this, because you do have to be careful. Obviously we've got all these really harsh swage lines on this panel, and one thing that we really don't want to do is to cut through on one of them edges, especially down this end of the wing that we're actually not going to put any colour on, because obviously we want to keep the colour just to the area that we're actually doing the repair. So one main thing that I would say to you is, when you are using the sander, as you can see me doing here, go up to your edges but don't go over your edges. Any edges we will catch with a Scotch-Brite afterwards, and if you do want to go over any of these sort of finer edges like this top section in a second, just give it one quick little go across like that and then finish off with Scotch-Brite. Now this is my preferred method as far as sanding a panel goes, because it means I'm cutting all the original factory peel. Say if this was a factory finish wing, then we're cutting all the peel out of the panel, which means that when I spray this panel, it will be the finish that I apply the clear coat to that will be the final finish. If you've got a panel that has already got a lot of orange peel in it, and then you go spraying on top of that, i.e. you've just grey scotched the whole panel, then you are technically in a way putting orange peel on top of orange peel, so it's a lot harder to get a nicer finish. So my main concentration now with this grey Scotch-Brite is to catch all those little edges that we couldn't catch with the sander, and make sure that everything is now a nice matte uniform keyed up finish. Then as always, we are just going to give this panel a blow off just to make sure that anything loose is off the panel inside and out, and also the stand as well, and then we'll get into prepping this panel for paintwork. And you will be surprised just how much dust and how much crap can actually sit on the inside of a panel, and when we get to clear coat this panel towards the end and we hit this with 2 bar of air pressure, it will move anything like that around really easily. Now exactly the same as in the rest of the stages, so, or should I say in the water base stage, because we're using the Leeson water base on this again. The first thing that we're going to do is use a solvent based panel wipe, just to make sure that any solvent based contaminants or sort of like oil based contaminants are off the surface of this panel. And as you can see there, that's the kind of finish we're going to get when we clear coat over this. So although it might look daunting that the whole panel is sanded matte at this point, the P1000 scratches are so fine that they are not going to show once we have clear coated over this panel. Next, we're just going to give it a quick clean with the Lessenol water-based degreaser. This will make sure that we've got that nice water clean surface for our water base to go down. And if you are using water base, you should always go for solvent based cleaner, then water based cleaner. And say if you were doing solvent, you could go for the water based cleaner first to make sure any water based contaminants are off, and then obviously finish with the solvent based cleaner. You should always finish with the base that you are using, so i.e. water for water and solvent for solvent. So for me, now we've got that lovely uniform matte finish on that panel, and that is for me a nice perfectly prepped panel. So let's get into the gun setup. Again, we're going to be using full fan on the fluid. We're going to be going all the way in and then coming out 2.5 turns. And again, for the base coat, the same as we did in the water base video, we're going to be setting this around 20 to 25 psi, which will be more than enough for applying the base coat. So the first stage before we start anything, again, is going to be to tack rag this wing off, to make sure that any excess dust particles or anything that has landed on this wing since we've prepped it are all removed, and obviously any fibres or anything from the cloths or anything that you wipe it down with, make sure everything's nice and clean. Now the main area that we're going to concentrate on first is colouring the area of the repair. We're not going to worry about trying to blend this panel. Now if you saw the Lessenol water-based video that we did before, we're just going to give this a half coat to start off with, and then we're going to get the air blower to dry that down, and then we can move on to a full wet coat. So we've dried that half coat down, and now we are just going to go on to that full wet coat. So again, we're not going to try and paint the whole wing. We just want this full wet coat over the area that we are trying to cover up. So we want to seal in those 500 scratches that we put in there, and obviously colour over that repair. Now we didn't need any primer on this because none of this was back to bare metal, and water base is a lot less abrasive than solvent base, so we've got no issues with anything ringing up or reacting as far as paint reaction goes. And that for me is the main reason why we switched over to water base in the first place. Now as far as this goes on this front section, now we have the colour. Now normally I have said to stick to that nice 90-degree angle, but as we blend this wing now, we want to turn our wrist and feather this paint out. We are not trying to put down a wet coat of paint at this point. We want to put the paint down in a light coat and then dust it out into the wing. So as you can see, I'm turning my wrist out, so the end of that spray pattern now is just dusting out into the wing. That is going to give us that nice blend. Now it doesn't matter if you go one way or the other way like I've just done there, both ways will work just fine, but we want to keep that overspray to a certain distance. We want to keep it so it's blending from the new shade that you'll be spraying on at one end to the old shade at the other end. Now obviously we don't want the paint hitting that far edge of the wing, because that edge of the wing is against a door, so the colour would look off, and we also don't want it on that top edge because then the colour could look off to the bonnet. So all we want to do is just nicely feather this out around about halfway into the panel, and that's going to give us a nice slow transition from our new shade that we've had mixed at the paint shop into the old shade that is on the car, because no matter how accurate your colour match is, you will never have an absolutely 110% perfect shade, because the way that we spray it in a paint shop is different to the way that they will spray it in a factory. So just factors like the actual laydown of the paint, etc., and the air pressures that it is sprayed at will completely alter the colour and how that sort of shade will look on the car. So if you put too much or too little air pressure, it will cause issues. Now I have just give that a quick tack rag because we are going to include the clear coat stage, and again we're going to use a full fan. We're going to use 2.5 turns on the fluid for the first coat, and now we've got the air pressure set at 2 bar for this clear coat. So we're going to follow the same steps here that we have in the previous videos and in the clear coat video. So if you haven't seen that clear coat video,
then I suggest you go over and check that out, because that will go into the clear coat stage in more detail than what I will here. So as far as now clear coating this wing, this is kind of where the magic happens as far as blending the paint goes. If you've got that paint blend nice across that wing now, when we finish putting this clear coat down on these two coats, you will not see any transition from your shade to the old factory paintwork on your car. Now, the whole point of re-clearing this panel is now this will give this a seamless repair. It will also completely hide our blend and give that nice look where, because we've stretched that blend across say halfway of a panel, that blend, once sealed up with clear coat, will then become invisible to the eye. As long as that blend has been done correctly, you should not be able to tell where the edge of your new shade finishes and the old factory paintwork begins, because this clear coat now is going to seal everything up and just finish off that seamless transition between the two different, technically what is the two different shades of the same colour. And this is where a lot of the expense comes in with car body repair and paintwork, because sometimes it is extremely difficult to explain to a customer that paintwork does need to be blended. They think you can just match the colour and straight paint a panel and bolt it on and it will look absolutely perfect, when in reality it's a million miles from that.
Okay, so now as you can see with the clear coat applied, now we're going from the new colour, which is there, and we've got a nice seamless blend into the old colour there. So we've got now what is a nice seamless repair on the panel. We've got a nice even blend. Once that's bolted back on the car, you're not going to notice the difference. Obviously, if you had a bumper attached to this on your car, then you'd probably want to blend the bumper corner a little bit as well. But as you can tell, you know, we've got our new colour around this area, feathered out into no colour here, and then into the original colour. So we've got a nice blend, and that is the point of blending the panel. We've got that nice seamless transition then between one colour and another. So that concludes part 5 on how to blend the base coat. We will touch on this again in a future video when we've got a car in the booth, so you can see in a little bit more detail how we go onto it on a bigger repair. Now in part 6, I think what we'll do is we'll separate this panel into two halves. One side will give a nib and a polish, and the other side will give a full flatten polish. So you can see the differences in the two processes, why we do the two different processes, and also the difference in the finish that you will get and the tools and materials that you will need to give this panel now that pristine finish that you want on your car. That's it from me for today. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell to be notified of when we have new uploads. That's it for me for today, guys, and I'll see you again soon.